You walked into my private office, he said slowly, each word measured. Past security, past my assistant's desk, directly into a meeting meant for my arranged fiancé. The moment Elena Chin walked through those mahogany doors clutching her worn resume, she had no idea she was about to become Mrs. Alexander Thornton, whether she wanted to or not. The glass tower of Thornton Industries pierced the morning sky like a shard of ice, its mirrored surface reflecting clouds that Elena Chin wished she could disappear into. Her hand trembled as she clutched her worn leather portfolio, the one her mother had given her before she passed. Back when life still made sense. Back when bills didn't pile up like accusations on her kitchen table. Floor 42, she muttered to herself, reading the crumpled email on her phone for the third time. The secretary position, her ticket out of the tiny apartment she shared with 3 strangers, out of the endless cycle of rejection letters and overdue notices. The elevator dinged, and Elena stepped into a corridor of polished marble and hushed luxury. Her sensible heels, the only pair without scuffs, clicked against the floor as she searched for Suite 4207. The numbers blurred together. 4201, 4203, 4205, there, 4207. She smoothed down her navy blazer, the one she'd found at a thrift store, and carefully mended where the seam had split. Deep breath. You can do this. You have to do this. Elena pushed open the heavy door. The office beyond was not what she expected. Instead of a reception area with plastic chairs and fluorescent lighting, she found herself in a cavernous space of dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the city, like a kingdom laid out for inspection. Modern art hung on the walls, pieces that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. You're late. The voice cut to the room like a blade through silk, deep, cold, commanding. Elena's head snapped toward the massive desk, where a man sat reviewing documents with the intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. Alexander Thornton. Even sitting, he radiated power. His suit was so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been sewn directly onto his body, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that probably cost more than her rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it had never smiled, and eyes the color of a winter storm. I'm sorry, Elena stammered, checking her phone. I thought the interview was at 9. Interview? One dark eyebrow arched. Is that what your family is calling this arrangement now? How quaint. Elena blinked. I'm sorry, I think there's been... Sit. It wasn't a request. Something in his tone made Elena's legs move before her brain could protest. She sank into the leather chair across from him, portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. Alexander finally looked up from his documents, and Elena felt the full force of his gaze. It was like being pinned by a spotlight, examined and measured, and found wanting all in the space of a heartbeat. You're not what I expected, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. The Beaumont family's photographs were generous. The what family? Elena's confusion was mounting by the second. Don't play coy. It's unbecoming. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I'll be frank, Miss Beaumont. This marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. Your family's hotels combined with Thornton Industries will create an empire. I don't expect love, affection, or any of that romantic nonsense. What I expect is discretion, compliance, and the ability to play your role in public. The words hit Elena like a bucket of ice water. Marriage? Beaumont? This man thought she was... There's been a mistake, she said quickly, leaning forward. I'm not. My name is Elena Chun. I'm here for the secretary position. I must have walked into the wrong office. Alexander's expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. Your family's games are tiresome already, Miss Beaumont. If you're trying to renegotiate the terms your father agreed to, I'm not trying to renegotiate anything. I'm not whoever you think I am. Elena's voice rose despite herself. She fumbled with her portfolio, pulling out her resume and placing it on his desk. Look, Elena Chun, bachelor's degree in business administration from State University. 3 years of administrative experience. I'm here to interview for a secretary position in your company. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Alexander's features. He picked up the resume, his eyes scanning the page with that same intense focus. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're not Genevieve Beaumont." "No, that's what I've been trying to tell you." Silence filled the room like fog. Elena watched as Alexander's mind worked, visible in the slight narrowing of his eyes, the way his fingers drummed once against the desk. "You walked into my private office," he said slowly, each word measured. "Past security, past my assistant's desk, directly into a meeting meant for my arranged fiancée." Elena's stomach dropped. "Your assistant's desk was empty. The door said 4207. That's where my interview." She stopped, a horrible realization dawning. "This isn't Suite 4207, is it? This is the executive floor. Suite 4207 is 2 floors down." "Oh my God." Elena stood abruptly, nearly dropping her portfolio. "I am so sorry. The elevator. I must have hit the wrong button. I'll go. Immediately. I'm so sorry for wasting your time." She turned toward the door, her face burning with humiliation, her heart sinking as she realized she was now horrendously late for her actual interview. "Stop." That voice again. It froze her mid-step. "Turn around." Elena turned slowly, expecting to see anger, maybe amusement at her expense. Instead, she saw something else in Alexander Thornton's eyes. Calculation. "Miss Chun." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion. He was tall, she realized, intimidatingly so. "It seems fate has played an interesting hand. I really should go. My arranged fiancée is due to arrive in..." He glanced at his watch. "Approximately 20 minutes. The woman I meant to marry for the sake of combining 2 corporate empires. A woman I've never met. Chosen by our families like we're still living in the 19th century." Elena had no idea where this was going, but something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Here's what's going to happen," Alexander continued, moving around his desk with predatory grace. "Genevieve Beaumont is, by all accounts, a spoiled socialite who sees his marriage as her ticket to greater status. She will make demands. She will expect jewelry, properties, her name in society pages. She will be, in short, insufferable." He stopped directly in front of Elena, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You, however, walked into the wrong office looking for a secretary position, which tells me you need a job. Desperately. If you're willing to interview at Thornton Industries, we're not known for our generous entry-level salaries or friendly work environment." Elena's mouth went dry. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you pretend to be Genevieve Beaumont, just for today. Just long enough for me to assess the real Genevieve when she arrives, and find a way out of this arrangement without triggering the breach of contract clauses my father negotiated before his death." "That's insane," Elena breathed. He returned to his desk, pulling out a checkbook. "I'll pay you $50,000. Cash, for 1 day of your time." The number hit Elena like a physical blow. $50,000. That was more than she'd made an entire past year. That was her student loans, her medical bills from her mother's final months, her rent for the next year. That was breathing room. That was survival. "I can't," she heard herself say, even as her mind screamed, "Yes, yes, take it." That's fraud. Impersonation. What if you continue living paycheck to paycheck, missing opportunities because you're drowning in debt? Alexander's eyes pinned her again. "I've been in business long enough to read people, Miss Chun. You're desperate. I'm offering you a lifeline. All you have to do is pretend to be my fiancé for a few hours." Elena's hands were shaking. This was crazy. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not real life, not to ordinary people who just want to make rent and maybe, someday, have a life that didn't feel like constantly treading water. What would I have to do? The words came out as a whisper. A ghost of a smile touched Alexander's lips, the first hint of any emotion besides cold calculation. "Nothing complicated. Sit beside me during the meeting. Let me introduce you as my fiancé. Look suitably pleased about our engagement. When the real Genevieve arrives, we'll claim there was a mix-up in scheduling. Simple. And if I'm caught, you won't be. Genevieve has never met me in person. All our arrangements were made through our families. You'll be gone before she arrives." Elena looked at the check he was already writing. $50,000. The number blurred as tears pricked her eyes. She thought of her apartment with its peeling paint and broken heater. Thought of a notice from the hospital about her mother's unpaid bills going to collections. Thought of all the interviews she'd been to, all the times she'd been told she was overqualified or underqualified or just not quite right. "One day," she said, "and then I walk away." "One day," Alexander agreed, signing the check with a flourish. "Do we have a deal, Miss Chun?" Elena took a deep breath. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice screamed that this was a terrible idea. But that voice was drowned out by the louder scream of her bank account, her collection notices, her desperate need to just survive. "We have a deal, Mr. Thornton." His hand extended across the desk. Elena took it, his grip firm and warm and somehow sealing her fate. "Welcome to your new role, Miss Beaumont," he said, his winter storm eyes holding hers. "Try not to make me regret this." As Elena sat back down, Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. "Interesting," he murmured. "What?" "The real Genevieve. She's delayed. Her flight from Paris was postponed. She won't arrive until tomorrow morning." Their eyes met across the desk, and Elena saw her own realization mirrored in his face. One day had just become one night. This is a terrible idea. Elena stood in the private bathroom adjoining Alexander's office, staring at her reflection in the gilt-framed mirror. In the past 30 minutes, her entire world had tilted sideways. "Too late for second thoughts, Miss Chun." Alexander's voice came from the other side of the door. "My mother will arrive in 15 minutes. She's insisted on meeting you before tonight's charity gala." "Charity gala?" Elena's voice squeaked. "You didn't mention a charity gala." "I'm mentioning it now. Consider it over time." Elena pressed her palms against the marble countertop, trying to steady her breathing. The face in the mirror looked terrified, eyes too wide, skin too pale, hair escaping from its careful bun. She looked exactly like what she was, a fraud. The door opened and Alexander entered without knocking, carrying a garment bag and a leather jewelry case. His eyes swept over her with clinical assessment. "You need to change," he said simply. "I'm wearing my best suit," which is perfectly adequate for a secretary interview and completely inadequate for my fiancée. He hung the garment bag on the hook. "Genevieve Beaumont wouldn't be caught dead in off-the-rack wool blend. Put this on." Elena unzipped the bag with trembling fingers, and her breath caught. Inside was a dress in deep emerald silk, the kind of garment she'd only ever seen in magazine spreads. The label read a designer name she couldn't pronounce. "I can't wear this. If I spill something, then I'll buy another. Get dressed, Miss Chun. The clock is ticking." He left, and Elena was alone with the dress and her spiraling thoughts. This was insane. She should walk out right now, apologize for wasting his time, and go find her actual interview. Except she'd already missed her interview, and she'd already shaken on the deal. And $50,000 was already written on a check with her name on it. She changed. The silk whispered against her skin like water, cool and impossibly soft. The dress fit as though it had been made for her, which was impossible, unless Alexander Thornton had an uncanny eye for measurements. It hugged her waist, flowed over her hips, and ended just above her knees in an elegant hem. She'd never worn anything so expensive in her life. When she emerged, Alexander was on his phone, but he ended the call the moment he saw her. For just a second, barely a heartbeat, something flickered in those cold gray eyes. Surprise? Appreciation? Then it was gone, replaced by his usual calculating stare. "Better," he said. "Now jewelry." He opened the leather case, and Elena's jaw dropped. Nestled on black velvet was a necklace of emeralds and diamonds that sparkled like captured starlight. Matching earrings lay beside it. "I can't wear these." What if you stop protesting and start acting like a woman who's about to marry into one of the wealthiest families in the country? His tone was sharp, but he handled the necklace with surprising gentleness as he moved behind her. "May I?" Elena nodded, unable to speak. She felt his fingers against the back of her neck. cool and steady as he fastened the clasp. The emerald settled against her collarbone, heavy and foreign. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "One more thing," Alexander said. He pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer and opened it to reveal a ring, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an antique platinum setting. "My grandmother's ring. It's expected." He took her left hand, and Elena's heart hammered as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Nothing about this made sense, but somehow everything was falling into place. "Now," Alexander said, still holding her hand, his thumb absently brushing over the ring. "Listen carefully. My mother is Catherine Thornton. She's intelligent, perceptive, and absolutely relentless. She will ask you questions. Keep your answers vague. You're still getting to know me. You're overwhelmed by the engagement. You're excited but nervous. Can you manage that?" "I'm already terrified, so that part should be easy," Elena muttered. The ghost of a smile touched his lips again. "Good. Use it. My mother respects authenticity." "Even fake authenticity?" "Especially that." He finally released her hand and checked his watch. "She's early." "Of course she is." As if summoned by his words, the office door opened, and a woman glided in with the bearing of someone who'd never questioned her. Catherine Thornton was in her early 60s, wearing a cream Chanel suit and pearls, her silver hair styled in an elegant bob. Her eyes, the same winter gray as her son's, swept over Elena with the precision of a laser. "Alexander," she said, her voice cultured and cool. "You didn't tell me your fiancé was so—" She paused, and Elena's heart stopped. "Lovely. Mother, may I present Miss Genevieve Beaumont." "Genevieve, my mother, Catherine Thornton." Elena's etiquette classes from her brief stint at a boutique hotel kicked in. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Thornton, it's an honor to meet you." Catherine took her hand, but instead of shaking it, she drew Elena closer, examining her with unnerving intensity. "Beaumont, yes, I can see the resemblance to your father. You have his eyes, though you're far more delicate than the photograph suggested." "Photographs? Right. Elena had forgotten there was a real Genevieve out there, with real photographs, a real face that this woman had likely studied. Panic fluttered in her chest. "I've been told I'm more understated in person," Elena managed. "Understated." Catherine released her hand and turned to Alexander. Interesting choice of words. "Tell me, my dear, how did you and my son meet?" He's been frustratingly vague about the details. This was it. The moment Elena would be exposed. She opened her mouth, not sure what would come out. "We met at the Carlisle Hotel," Alexander interjected smoothly, moving to stand beside Elena. His hand settled on the small of her back, possessive and warm even through the silk. "Genevieve was overseeing renovations to the Paris location. I was there on business. It was unexpected." Elena forced herself not to stiffen at his touch. She looked up at him and found him already looking down at her. His expression softened just enough to seem genuine. For a moment, she almost believed he was seeing her, Elena, and not just a convenient stand-in. "Unexpected," Catherine repeated, her tone suggesting she found the entire situation unexpected. "And the engagement? Rather rushed, isn't it?" "When you know," Alexander said. His hand pressed slightly harder against Elena's back, a warning or encouragement. She couldn't tell. "Besides, you've been after me to settle down for years. I thought you'd be pleased." "Pleased." Catherine's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'll reserve judgment until I know your fiancé better. Genevieve, you'll sit with me at the gala tonight. We have much to discuss." Elena's mouth went dry. "I would be honored, Mrs. Thornton." "Of course you would." Catherine moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, my dear. That dress, Valentino, if I'm not mistaken. Lovely choice. Though I'm surprised. I was told he preferred Dior." The trap snapped closed. Elena felt Alexander tense beside her. She started. "Used to." Elena pivoted quickly. "I used to prefer Dior, but I'm trying new things. New life, new style, you know?" Catherine's eyebrow arched in a way that was eerily similar to her son's. For a long moment, She said nothing. Then, how? Refreshing. I'll see you both tonight. 6 sharp. Don't be late, Alexander. You know how I feel about tardiness. She left, and the silence in her wake felt like the aftermath of a storm. Elena realized she'd been holding her breath and let out in a shaky exhale. Dior, she whispered. How was I supposed to know the real Genevieve prefers Dior? You weren't, Alexander said, moving away from her, breaking the contact that had somehow felt anchoring. But you recovered well. Quick thinking. This is getting more complicated by the minute. Your mother is going to realize. My mother suspects something is off. She always does. But suspicion isn't proof. He loosened his ties slightly, the first sign of tension she'd seen from him. The gala is the real test. Society will be there. Business associates. Anyone who's anyone. You'll need to convince them all. Elena sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted despite the morning having barely begun. I don't know if I can do this. Too late for that conversation. But his tone had lost some of its edge. He moved to a hidden bar cart and poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. Drink. It's 10 in the morning. Drink. Elena took the glass and sipped. Whiskey, smooth and expensive, burning a warm path down her throat. She drank again, deeper this time. Alexander leaned against his desk, watching her. You're doing better than I expected. That's not very comforting. It wasn't meant to be comforting. It was meant to be honest. He swirled his own glass. My mother is the easy part. Tonight, you'll meet vultures in evening wear. They'll be looking for weakness, for scandal, for anything they can use. You have to be perfect. No pressure, Elena muttered into her whiskey. $50,000 worth of pressure. That sobered her. He was right. She'd agreed to this. The check was already written, and now she was in too deep to back out. So, teach me, she said, setting down her glass and meeting his eyes. If I have to be Genevieve Beaumont for a night, teach me how. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. Respect, maybe. He pushed off from the desk and extended his hand. Then we'd better start with how you walk. No offense, Miss Chun, but you move like someone who's afraid to take up space. Elena took his hand and stood. And how should I move? Like you own every room you enter. His hand moved to her waist, adjusting her posture. Shoulders back. Chin up. You're not auditioning for approval. You're granting it by your presence. That's very arrogant. That's very Beaumont. His hands were still on her waist, and Elena was suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were standing. Again, walk across the room, like you're worth more than everyone else in it. Elena walked. Alexander critiqued. She walked again. And again. They practiced handshakes, firm but not aggressive, lasting exactly 3 seconds. They practiced small talk, vague enough to avoid specifics, interesting enough to seem engaged. They practiced the way she should stand beside him, close but not clingy, present but not demanding attention. Hours passed. Elena's feet hurt in the heels Alexander had sent someone to buy. Louboutins, red-soled and impossibly high. Her face hurt from maintaining a pleasant expression. Her brain hurt from trying to remember all the names and faces in the society photos Alexander showed her. These people, she said, studying a photo of a woman dripping in diamonds, they really care about all this? The right dress, the right posture, the right amount of eye contact. They care about power, Alexander corrected. Everything else is just the language power speaks in this world. And you? Do you care? He looked at her, really looked at her, for a long moment. I care about my company, about the legacy my father built and my grandfather before him. Everything else is negotiable. Even your marriage? Especially that. He moved away, breaking the moment, which is why this arrangement with Genevieve needs to be dissolved. A loveless marriage might be acceptable to our families, but it's a weakness I can't afford. Shareholders, board members, they watch for fractures. A hostile spouse could undermine everything. Elena studied him. This man who talked about marriage like a corporate merger, who measured relationships in terms of leverage and liability. There was something almost sad about it, though she doubted Alexander Thornton would appreciate the observation. What about love? She asked quietly. What about it? Don't you want, I don't know, something real? Someone you actually choose. Alexander's laugh was cold. Love is for people who can afford the luxury of making emotional decisions. I'm not one of those people. Before Elena could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his jaw tightened. What? Elena asked. Change of plans. Genevieve's flight has been delayed again. Severe weather in Paris. She won't arrive until the day after tomorrow. Their eyes met, and Elena saw her own shock reflected back at her. 2 days, she whispered. 2 days, Alexander confirmed. Can you do it? Elena thought about walking away, about the check, the dress, the ring on her finger that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, about returning to her real life, her real problems, her real self. Then she thought about her mother's medical bills, about the eviction notice she'd received last week, about the fact that she'd already crossed the line into this insanity. Double the amount, she heard herself say. 100,000 total. And I'll do it. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Then, slowly he smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and wolfish and somehow approving. Negotiating. Good. You might actually survive tonight. He extended his hand. Deal, Miss Chun. Elena shook it, sealing her fate for a second time. Deal, Mr. Thornton. As their hands clasped, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to far more than 2 days of pretending. She'd agreed to step into a world of wealth and power and danger that she didn't understand, playing a role that could destroy her if discovered. The office door opened and an assistant entered. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked at Elena with barely concealed curiosity. Mr. Thornton, your car is ready, and I've arranged for a stylist team to meet Miss Beaumont at your penthouse for the gala preparations. Excellent, Margaret. Thank you. When they were alone again, Alexander gathered his suit jacket. Time for Act 2. We'll go to my penthouse. The stylist will prepare you for tonight. And Miss Chun, he paused at the door, looking back at her. Try to enjoy it. It's not every day someone gets to play Cinderella. Cinderella's story ended at midnight, Elena pointed out. Then let's hope yours lasts longer. His eyes held hers for a moment that stretched like taffy. You're gonna need it to. They left the office together, Elena's hand tucked into the crook of Alexander's arm. The first of 1,000 touches they'd share over the next 2 days. Each one a small lie that somehow felt dangerously close to truth. Alexander's penthouse occupied the entire 55th floor of the Thornton Tower, a glass and steel area that looked out over the city, like an eagle surveying its territory. Elena stepped out of the private elevator into a space that redefined luxury. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, modern art that probably cost more than her childhood home. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, making her feel like she was floating above the world. This way, Alexander said, his hand at the small of her back again. That touch was becoming familiar, dangerous in its familiarity. The team should be set up in the master suite. Team. Hair, makeup, wardrobe. You didn't think you'd attend the Thornton Foundation Gala in a borrowed cocktail dress, did you? Elena didn't have time to respond before they entered a bedroom the size of her entire apartment, currently transformed into what looked like a high-end salon. 3 women descended on her immediately, speaking in rapid-fire fashion terminology that might as well have been a foreign language. Bone structure is good, one said, tilting Elena's chin. We can work with this. Hair needs deep conditioning, another declared, running fingers through Elena's ponytail. When was your last trim? Skin is decent, but we'll need to brighten, contour, highlight. Elena caught Alexander's eye over the women's heads. He was trying not to smile, actually trying not to smile, as if her discomfort amused him. She glared at him. I'll leave you to it, he said. You have 3 hours. Make her spectacular. She already is. When the stylist said, we're just enhancing. After he left, the transformation began. Elena was scrubbed, buffed, moisturized, and massaged. Her hair was washed 3 times with products that smelled like heaven and probably cost like hell. As the stylist worked, they chatted among themselves, occasionally asking Elena questions she deflected with the vague answers Alexander had taught her. How did you meet Mr. Thornton? asked Simone, the lead stylist, as she applied what felt like the 15th layer of something to Elena's face. In Paris, Elena said, keeping her eyes closed as instructed. It was unexpected. Oh, Paris. Simone sighed. So romantic. And he proposed? Details, darling, we need details. Elena's mind raced. She hadn't prepared a proposal story. Think, it was private, she managed. Very straightforward but sincere. Straightforward? Simone laughed. That sounds like Mr. Thornton. I've worked for the family for years. He's not one for grand gestures. No, Elena agreed, wondering what the real Alexander Thornton was like beneath the cold exterior. He's more subtle. 2 hours later, Elena barely recognized her reflection. Her hair fell in glossy waves over bare shoulders. Her makeup was flawless. Smoky eyes, sharp cheekbones, lips painted a deep red that somehow made her look powerful instead of just pretty. She looked like the kind of woman who belonged in a penthouse, who belonged on Alexander Thornton's arm. Now for the dress, Simone announced, unveiling a garment bag with the reverence of a priest presenting a holy relic. The gown was breathtaking, black silk that seemed to absorb light, with a neckline that plunged daringly in a slit that climbed to mid-thigh. Elegant, sexy, and definitely not something Elena Chun from apartment 3B would ever wear. But Genevieve Beaumont would. She stepped into the dress, and Simone zipped her up. The silk molded to her body like a second skin. The stylist fastened a diamond choker around her throat. Not the emeralds from earlier, but something even more striking, with a single large diamond that caught the light with every breath. Perfect. Simone breathed. Absolutely perfect. Elena stared at the stranger in the mirror. This woman was confident, elegant, untouchable. This woman belonged in Alexander's world. He's a lucky man. One of the other stylists said, adjusting Elena's hair one final time. Elena wanted to laugh. Lucky? There was nothing lucky about the situation. Just two people trapped in a web of circumstance, playing roles neither of them wanted. A knock at the door made them all turn. Alexander entered, and Elena watched his reflection in the mirror as his eyes found her. He stopped mid-step, and for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightened, and something flickered across his face that looked almost like hunger before he locked it down. Will she do, Mr. Thornton? Simone asked, a knowing smile on her lips. She'll do, Alexander said, his voice rougher than usual. He cleared his throat. Ladies, thank you. You've outdone yourselves. Please bill everything to my personal account and add a bonus for the rush job. The stylist packed up with practiced efficiency, leaving Elena alone with Alexander. He approached slowly, his eyes never leaving her reflection in the mirror. You look... He stopped behind her, his hands hovering near her waist but not quite touching. You look like you belong to this world. That's the idea, isn't it? Elena turned to face him, and the movement brought them closer together than she'd intended. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy, with an undertone of spice. The idea, Alexander said, his eyes dropping to the necklace at her throat, then lowered her where the dress revealed the curve of her breasts, was to make you believable, not to make me forget. Forget what? His eyes snapped back to hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. That this is temporary. That you're not really mine. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, making the diamond choker feel tight. I should finish getting ready, Alexander said abruptly, stepping back. We leave in 30 minutes. There's champagne in the kitchen if you need to steady your nerves. He disappeared into what was presumably a walk-in closet, leaving Elena alone with her racing thoughts and the growing sense that this arrangement was far more complicated than she'd anticipated. The Thornton Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum, its grand halls transformed into a glittering wonderland of crystal chandeliers, white roses, and enough wealth to solve world hunger. Elena stepped out of the limousine on Alexander's arm, flashbulbs exploding like stars as photographers captured their arrival. Smile, Alexander murmured near her ear. You're madly in love with me, remember? Elena tilted her head up toward him, arranging her face into what she hoped looked like adoration rather than terror. His arm tightened around her waist as they climbed the museum steps, past velvet ropes and curious stairs. Inside was even more overwhelming. The Great Hall was packed with New York's elite. Women in couture gowns, men in bespoke tuxedos, everyone dripping in jewels and privilege. A string quartet played Mozart near the entrance, while waiters circulated with champagne, and hors d'oeuvres that were probably tiny works of art. Alexander, darling. A woman in silver sequins descended on them, air kissing near Alexander's cheeks. You actually came, and you brought... Oh my God, is this her? Is this the Beaumont girl? Genevieve. This is Patricia Vanderbilt. Patricia, my fiancée, Genevieve Beaumont. Patricia's eyes swept over Elena with the intensity of an MRI scan. Well, aren't you just lovely? Though I have to say, the photos didn't do you justice. You're so much more delicate than I expected. There was that word again. Delicate. Elena was starting to understand it was code for not what we expected. Thank you, Elena said, channeling every ounce of confidence the dress and makeup had given her. Alexander has told me so much about you. Has he? Patricia's eyebrows lifted. How interesting, considering I don't recall him mentioning you until the engagement announcement yesterday. So sudden, wasn't it? When you know, you know. Elena echoed Alexander's earlier words, letting her hand drift to rest against his chest in what she hoped looked like a natural gesture of affection. She felt his heart beating steady and strong beneath her palm. Indeed. Patricia's smile was sharp. Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get acquainted. After all, you'll be joining our little social circle now. The wives' luncheons, the charity committees, all those tedious obligations that come with marrying a Thornton. I'm looking forward to it. Elena lied smoothly. Patricia drifted away, and Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well done, Alexander murmured. Patricia Vanderbilt is one of the worst gossips in our circle. If you'd stumbled, everyone would know by morning. No pressure, Elena muttered. Champagne. A waiter appeared at her elbow, and Elena gratefully took a glass. She needed something to do with her hands, something to anchor her in this surreal situation. The next hour was a blur of introductions. Names and faces blended together. Ashton, Carmichael, DuPont, Weatherby, each one more moneyed and more curious than the last. Elena smiled until her face hurt, laughed at jokes she didn't find funny, and deflected personal questions with the skill of someone who'd been doing this her whole life instead of just learning it that morning. Alexander never left her side. His hand remained at her waist, possessive and anchoring. Occasionally, he'd lean down to whisper in her ear, warnings about who was approaching, reminders about names, or just simple encouragements. To everyone watching, they looked like a couple who couldn't bear to be apart. Elena was starting to understand how easy it would be to believe the lie. Alexander, there you are. Catherine Thornton appeared, regal in navy silk, with a silver-haired man at her side who could only be family. He had the same aristocratic features, the same cold gray eyes. Uncle Richard, Alexander said, his voice notably cooler. I didn't realize you'd be attending. And missed a chance to meet your mysterious fiancé? Wouldn't dream of it. Richard Thornton's eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Miss Beaumont, what an unexpected pleasure. The pleasure is mine, Elena said, though everything about this man suggested the opposite was true. Richard is my father's younger brother, Alexander explained, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on Elena's waist. He handles our European operations. Or rather, I handle them while Alexander plays CEO in the New York office. Richard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tell me, Miss Beaumont, does your family know how quickly this engagement came together? The Beaumonts are usually so meticulous about these arrangements. It was a trap, Elena realized. Richard Thornton was testing her, looking for cracks in their story. My family trusts my judgment, she said carefully. And when Alexander and I met in Paris, everything else became irrelevant. Paris, Richard repeated, swirling his scotch. How romantic. And which hotel were you overseeing? I have close ties to the Beaumont properties. I'm surprised we never crossed paths. Elena's mind raced. She knew nothing about hotels, nothing about Paris, nothing about the real Genevieve's life. Alexander's hand squeezed her waist, a warning or encouragement. She couldn't tell. The renovations were fairly contained, she said, keeping her voice light. I was mostly working with the design teams, not front-facing operations. It's quite possible you were there and we simply didn't. Darling, Alexander interrupted smoothly. Didn't you tell me you wanted to see the new Rothko they just acquired? It's in the contemporary wing. He turned to his uncle, his smile polite but dismissive. Excuse us, Uncle Richard. Business can wait for one evening. He guided Elena away before Richard could protest, his hand firm against her back as they navigated the crowd toward a quieter gallery. That was close. Elena breathed once they were alone among the abstract paintings. Too close. My uncle is... Alexander's jaw tightened. He's been trying to undermine my position as CEO since my father died. He thinks he should have inherited the company. He would love nothing more than to find proof that this engagement is... Then maybe we should call this off, before someone gets hurt. No. Alexander turned to face her, his eyes intense. I need this. The board is already questioning my leadership. Half of them are my uncle's allies. A stable personal life. A proper marriage to solidify the Beaumont alliance. It's the leverage I need to keep control of my own company. So I'm leveraged now? You're a solution to a problem. But something in his voice had softened. Though I'll admit, you're handling this better than I expected. The way you navigated Patricia. How you deflected Richard's questions. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. Every second. I'm convinced someone will see through me. They won't. You know why? Alexander stepped closer. Close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because you're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're just highlighting different aspects of who you are. The confidence was always there. The grace, the intelligence. I saw it this morning when you walked into my office. You just needed the right setting to let it show. Elena's breath caught. There was something in the way he was looking at her, something that made her skin feel too tight and her pulse too fast. This wasn't part of the act. This was real, whatever this was. Alexander. She started, not sure what she was going to say. There you are. Catherine Thornton's voice cut through the moment like a knife. She swept into the gallery, her eyes moving between Elena and Alexander with sharp assessment. The speeches are about to begin. You're expected at the head table. The spell broke. Alexander stepped back, his expression shuddering back into its usual coolness. Of course. Shall we? He offered Elena his arm, and she took it, letting him lead her back into Grand Hall where a stage had been set up. The head table was positioned front and center, and Elena found herself seated between Alexander and his mother, with Richard Thornton directly across from her, watching her like a hawk. The speeches began. Philanthropic platitudes about giving back, about the Thornton family's commitment to the arts and education. Alexander was called to the stage, and Elena watched him transform into his public persona. Charming, confident, completely in control. He spoke about his father's legacy, about carrying forward the family tradition of service. He was magnetic, and Elena understood in that moment how he'd built an empire. This was a man people would follow. But when he looked back at the head table, when his eyes found hers, she saw something else. Something vulnerable and real that he quickly masked as he returned to his seat. Dinner was served. 7 courses of culinary artistry that Elena barely tasted. She was too aware of Alexander beside her, of his thigh occasionally brushing against hers under the table, of the way his hand would drift the back of her chair when he leaned over to murmur something in her ear. You're doing beautifully, he said during the 4th course, his breath warm against her temple. My mother is impressed. I can tell. How can you tell? She hasn't smiled once. Exactly. If she'd found fault, she would have smiled and then eviscerated you over dessert. Silence from Catherine Thornton is approval. Your family is terrifying, Elena whispered back. You have no idea. But there was something almost affectionate in his tone. After dinner, the dancing began. A full orchestra replaced the string quartet, and couples drifted onto the dance floor in a swirl of silken diamonds. Elena watched nervously, remembering the brief dancing lesson Alexander had given her that afternoon. Basic steps, nothing fancy, just enough to not embarrass herself. "Shall we?" Alexander stood, offering his hand. Elena took it, her heart hammering as he led her onto the floor. His hand settled at her waist, large and warm, while his other hand clasped hers. They began to move, and Elena was grateful for those practice sessions. Her feet remembered the steps even as her mind spun. "Relax," Alexander murmured, pulling her slightly closer. "You're too tense. Everyone's watching, and you look like you're being led to your execution." "I feel like I am." "Then feel something else." His hand spread wider across her back, and suddenly they were moving together, their bodies finding a rhythm that felt natural, inevitable. "Feel the music. Feel this." Elena let herself sink into the dance, into the warmth of his body against hers, into the strength of his arms. Around them, the room blurred into streaks of light and color. It was just them, moving together, breathing together, existing in the small bubble of space and time. "This is dangerous," Elena heard herself say. "What is this? Us. It's starting to feel real." Alexander's hand tightened on her waist. His eyes, when they met hers, were dark and intense. "It's not real. It's Mr. Thornton." "Miss Beaumont." A photographer appeared at the edge of the dance floor, camera raised. One shot for the society pages. The happy couple. Before Elena could protest, Alexander turned her smoothly, dipping her in a move that was pure theatrical romance. His face hovered inches above hers, his eyes boring into hers with an intensity that stole her breath. The camera flashed, capturing the moment. When he pulled her upright, Elena was dizzy. From the dip, from the champagne, from the way Alexander was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "That photograph," she said shakily, "will be everywhere tomorrow." "Good. Let people talk. Let my uncle see that this engagement is real." But his voice lacked its usual conviction. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Other couples pressed closer together, and Alexander drew Elena flush against him, eliminating any space between them. She could feel his heart beating, could feel the rise and fall of his chest. This was beyond acting. This was something else entirely. "Elena," he said, using her real name for the first time since the charade began. "When this is over, don't." She cut him off, pulling back slightly to look at him. "Don't make promises or plans or anything else. This ends in 2 days. I go back to my life. You figure out how to escape this arranged marriage. We walk away like none of this ever happened. And if I don't want to walk away?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Elena's response was saved by the arrival of a distinguished-looking couple, all smiles and congratulations. Wanted to discuss the engagement, the wedding plans, the merger of two great families. Elena smiled and lied and played her role, but her mind was spinning. If I don't want to walk away, what did that even mean? This was a business arrangement, a temporary solution to both their problems. It couldn't be anything more, could it? The rest of the gala passed in a blur. More dancing, more introductions, more champagne until Elena's head felt light, and the room tilted slightly. Alexander's hand remained at her back, steady and anchoring, keeping her grounded even as everything else spun out of control. Finally, mercifully, Catherine Thornton announced she was leaving, which seemed to be the signal for the party to wind down. Alexander retrieved their coats, and they said their goodbyes, Elena's face aching from smiling. The limousine was a relief, dim and quiet and private. Elena sank into the leather seat with a groan, kicking off the Louboutins that had become instruments of torture. "You survived," Alexander said, loosening his bow tie with one hand. In the dim light, with his hair slightly mussed and his formal edges softened, he looked almost human, almost approachable, barely. Elena let her head fall back against the seat. How do you do that every night? Practice, and a healthy understanding that most of those people are insufferable. He poured 2 glasses of champagne from the limo's bar. "But you You were magnificent. Even my mother was impressed, and that's nearly impossible. Elena accepted the champagne, their fingers brushing in exchange. That simple touch sent electricity up her arm, and she pulled back quickly. Dangerous. This was all so dangerous. What happens now? She asked. Now we go back to the penthouse. You'll stay in the guest suite tonight, separate from my rooms. Before you worry, tomorrow we have brunch with the Ashton family. They're major shareholders, and they've been pushing for this marriage alliance. More acting. More acting, Alexander confirmed. He studied her over the rim of his glass. Though I'm starting to wonder if it still qualifies as acting. It has to be, Elena said firmly, more to herself than to him. Because in 2 days, Genevieve arrives, and this ends. We agreed. We did. But Alexander didn't sound convinced. The limousine pulled up to Thornton Tower, and they rode the private elevator up in charred silence. Elena was acutely aware of Alexander beside her, of the space between them that felt simultaneously too much and not enough. At the penthouse, Alexander showed her to the guest suite, a space as large as her entire apartment, with a king-size bed, a marble bathroom, and windows that overlooked the glittering city. There's a closet full of clothes, Alexander said from the doorway. Everything you might need. My assistant had it stocked earlier. You think of everything. I tried to. He lingered in the doorway, and Elena had the strangest sense that he wanted to say something more. But instead, he just nodded. Good night, Elena. You did well tonight. Good night, Alexander. He left, closing the door behind him, and Elena was alone with the city lights and her spiraling thoughts. She should feel relieved. Triumphant, even. She'd pulled off the performance of a lifetime, had convinced New York's elite that she belonged in their world. Instead, she felt hollow, like she left part of herself on that dance floor, in the warmth of Alexander's arms, in the intensity of his gaze when he'd said her real name. Elena changed out a gown, hanging it carefully in the closet next to dozens of other designer pieces. She scrubbed off the makeup, watching Genevieve Beaumont disappear to reveal Elena Chin underneath, ordinary, unremarkable, out of her depth. She climbed into the enormous bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed the evening on an endless loop. The dancing, the touches, the moment when Alexander had asked, "What if I don't want to walk away?" Somewhere in this penthouse, Alexander Thornton was lying in his own bed, probably thinking practical thoughts about business strategies and contract clauses. He wasn't thinking about her. He couldn't be. This was temporary. This was business. Elena repeated it like a mantra until finally, near dawn, exhaustion pulled her under into restless dreams of ballrooms and champagne and gray eyes that saw too much. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and, for a disoriented moment, had no idea where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The gala, the dancing, Alexander's question hanging between them like a lit fuse. She sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. The bedside clock read 9:47 a.m. She'd slept later than she had in years, probably due to exhaustion and champagne. A knock at the door made her jump. Yes. Miss Chun, it's Margaret, Mr. Thornton's assistant. May I come in? Elena grabbed a robe from the closet. Silk, of course, because apparently Alexander Thornton didn't believe in terry cloth, and opened the door. Margaret entered carrying a garment bag and a tray laden with breakfast. She was the same sharp-eyed woman from Alexander's office, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly what was going on. Mr. Thornton thought you might be hungry, Margaret said, setting down the tray on a small table by the windows. And you have brunch with the Ashtons at noon, so I brought appropriate attire. Thank you. Elena eyed the food, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs Benedict that looked like it came from a five-star restaurant. Is Alexander, Mr. Thornton, is he awake? He's been in his office since 6. Conference call with Tokyo. Margaret's expression softened slightly. He did ask me to check on you, though. Make sure you had everything you needed. Something about that small gesture made Elena's chest tighten. She pushed the feeling away. After Margaret left, Elena ate breakfast while scrolling through her phone. The society pages were already flooded with photos from the gala, and prominently featured was that dance floor moment, Alexander dipping her, their faces inches apart, looking at each other like the rest of the world had ceased to exist. The caption read, "New York's most eligible bachelor off the market, Alexander Thornton and fiancée Genevieve Beaumont steal the show at last night's Thornton Foundation Gala." Sources say the couple couldn't keep their hands off each other. Wedding bells soon. Elena stared at the photo, her stomach churning. That wasn't Genevieve Beaumont. That was her, Elena Chun, pretending to be someone she wasn't. And in 48 hours, the real Genevieve would arrive, and this house of cards would collapse. She needed to remember that. Needed to keep her distance, maintain the boundaries of their arrangement. The garment bag contained a cream-colored dress, elegant but understated, perfect for a Sunday brunch. Elena showered in the bathroom, which had more jets and options than a spaceship cockpit, and got ready, applying minimal makeup and pulling her hair into a sleek ponytail. When she emerged from the guest suite, she found Alexander in the living room, dressed casually in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was on his phone, speaking rapid-fire Mandarin, and he looked up when she entered. His eyes swept over her, and something flickered in their depths before he ended his call. "Good morning," he said. "You look rested." "I am. Thank you for..." She gestured vaguely at everything. The room, the breakfast, this entire surreal situation. "You earned it. Last night was flawless." He poured coffee from a carafe into 2 mugs. Though we're already trending on social media, that photograph is everywhere. I saw. Elena accepted the coffee gratefully. "We look very convincing." "We do." Alexander's gaze lingered on her face. Almost too convincing. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Elena sipped her coffee, using it as an excuse to look away from those 2 perceptive eyes. "About brunch," Alexander said, apparently deciding to ignore whatever was happening between them. "The Ashtons are important. Gregory Ashton controls 15% of Thornton Industries shares. His wife Diane is my mother's closest friend. They've been invested in this marriage arrangement from the beginning. So more performance." "More performance," he agreed. "Though after last night, I don't think you'll have any trouble. You've already won my mother over, which I didn't think was possible." "She told you that?" "She called this morning. Said you were surprisingly authentic, and that she could see why I chose you." Alexander's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. From Catherine Thornton, that's a ringing endorsement. Elena set down her coffee cup, sudden nerves fluttering in her stomach. "Alexander, about last night, when you asked." "Forget I said anything." His voice turned brisk, businesslike. The champagne, the atmosphere, it got to both of us. "Let's focus on getting through today and tomorrow. Then we'll figure out how to extricate ourselves from this situation cleanly." It was exactly what Elena had wanted. Clear boundaries, a reminder that this was temporary. So, why did it feel like a door slamming shut? "Right," she said. "Of course. Business arrangement. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Alexander echoed, but his eyes told a different story. The Ashton estate was in the Hamptons, a sprawling property of manicured lawns and old money. Their limousine pulled up the circular drive to find several other cars already parked. Mercedes, Bentleys, a Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than Elena would earn in 10 lifetimes. "More people than I expected," Alexander muttered, helping Elena out of the car. "Is that a problem?" "Depends on who showed up." His hand settled at her waist, that familiar, anchoring touch. "Stay close to me. And remember, you're madly in love and completely comfortable in this world." Elena barely had time to nod before the front door opened and a couple in their 60s emerged. Gregory Ashton, silver-haired and distinguished, and his wife Diane, elegant in linen and pearls. Alexander, and this must be the famous Genevieve. Diane swept forward, clasping Elena's hands. "My dear, you're even lovelier than the photographs. Though I must say, you look quite different than I expected." There was that observation again. Elena forced a smile. "I've been told I'm more understated in person." Understated. What a refreshing change from the usual society girls. Diane linked her arm through Elena's, already pulling her toward the house. Come. Everyone's dying to meet you. We've made quite an event of it. Inside, the house was full of people. At least 20 guests milling about with mimosas and Bloody Marys. Elena recognized several faces from the gala, including the dreaded Patricia Vanderbilt. Darling, Patricia descended immediately. 2 events in 2 days. We're being spoiled. Diane insisted. Alexander said smoothly, his hand never leaving Elena's back. She wanted to officially welcome Genevieve to the family. How sweet. Though I have to say, Genevieve, I've been dying to ask, where exactly did you go to school? I have connections to most of the European finishing schools, but I can't place your pedigree. It was a trap, elegantly baited. Elena's mind raced. She knew nothing about the real Genevieve's education. Nothing about finishing schools or pedigrees. I'm afraid my education was rather unconventional, she said, channeling every period drama she'd ever watched. My father believed in private tutors and real-world experience rather than traditional schooling. Hotels don't run themselves, after all. How progressive. Patricia's smile was sharp. And your mother? I don't recall hearing much about her. She passed when I was young, Elena said. And that at least was true, even if she was talking about her own mother rather than Genevieve's. Father raised me. Something in her voice must have conveyed genuine emotion, because Patricia's expression softened fractionally. I'm sorry, dear. That must have been difficult. Before the conversation could continue, Gregory Ashton called everyone to attention, tapping his glass. If I could have everyone's attention, Diane and I wanted to gather our closest friends to celebrate Alexander and Genevieve's engagement properly. A server appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Alexander took 2, handing one to Elena, his fingers brushing hers in a touch that lasted a beat too long. To love, Gregory continued, raising his glass. To family, and to the joining of 2 great legacies. Alexander, your father will be proud. Genevieve, welcome to our circle. To love. The room echoed, and everyone drank. Elena forced down the champagne, feeling like a fraud. These people were toasting a lie, celebrating a union that didn't exist, welcoming a woman who wasn't her. You're pale, Alexander murmured near her ear. Are you all right? I just need a moment. Fresh air. The terrace is through those doors. I'll run interference. Elena escaped gratefully, slipping through French doors onto a stone terrace that overlooked the ocean. The salt air was a relief after the perfumed closeness of the house. She gripped the balustrade, trying to steady her breathing. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Elena spun to find an older woman she hadn't met before, standing in the shadows with a martini. She looked to be in her 70s, with white hair and shrewd blue eyes. I'm sorry, Elena said. I didn't realize anyone was out here. Don't apologize. These events are exhausting even when you're born to them. I can't imagine navigating them as an outsider. The woman moved into the light, and Elena could see the family resemblance, the same aristocratic features as Alexander. I'm Evelyn Thornton, Alexander's grandmother. Elena's heart stopped. Mrs. Thornton, I didn't know you'd be here. Last-minute decision. I wanted to meet the woman who captured my grandson's heart. Evelyn's eyes were sharp as scalpels, though I'm wondering if that's actually what happened. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Evelyn sipped her martini. I've known Alexander since the day he was born. I know every expression, every tell. And last night, when he looked at you on that dance floor, I saw something I've never seen before. Genuine feeling. But there's also fear in his eyes. And in yours. Elena's hands were shaking. Mrs. Thornton. Relax, child. I'm not going to expose you. Evelyn set down her glass. Whatever arrangement you and Alexander have, it's working. He looks alive for the first time since his father died. And you, she studied Elena. You're not what I expected for him. But perhaps that's exactly what he needs. It's not what you think. Isn't it? Evelyn's smile was knowing. I was young once, my dear. I know how these things start. Practical, businesslike, nothing personal. And I know how quickly that can change when two people are forced into proximity. Especially two people who are trying very hard not to fall for each other. Before Elena could respond, the terrace doors opened and Alexander appeared, his eyes finding Elena immediately. "Grandmother, I didn't know you were here." "Surprise." Evelyn moved toward him, kissing his cheek. "I wanted to meet your Genevieve. She's delightful." "She is," Alexander agreed, his eyes still on Elena. Something passed between them, wordless and charged. "Well, I'll leave you young people alone. But Alexander?" Evelyn paused at the door. "Whatever you're doing, be careful. Hearts are fragile things, even when we pretend they're not." She left, and Alexander moved Elena's side at the balustrade. "What did she say to you?" "That she knows." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Or suspects." She didn't say exactly, but... "My grandmother is the most perceptive person I know. If she suspects, others might too." Alexander's jaw tightened. "We need to be more careful. But we need to end this now, before someone gets hurt. End it." "Elena, we're too deep now. That photograph is everywhere. My mother approves of you. The board thinks this marriage will stabilize the company. If we call it off now, it'll raise questions we can't answer. Then what do we do? We see it through. Tomorrow, Genevieve arrives. We'll tell everyone there was a mix-up, that she and I decided we weren't compatible, and that the engagement is off. Clean break. And what about us?" The question escaped before Elena could stop it. Alexander's eyes darkened. "What about us?" "You know what I mean. This," she gestured between them. "Whatever this is, it's getting complicated." "It's not complicated. It's..." "Alexander, there you are." Diane Ashton appeared on the terrace, all smiles. "Come, both of you. We're about to serve brunch, and you two are the guests of honor." They had no choice but to follow her inside, but Elena felt Alexander's hand at her back. Fingers splayed wide, pressing with an urgency that felt like a message in code. Brunch was a lavish affair. Eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, pastries, fresh fruit, mimosas flowing freely. Elena found herself seated between Alexander and Patricia Vanderbilt, fielding questions about wedding plans that didn't exist. "Have you set a date?" Patricia asked, spreading jam on a scone. "We're thinking spring," Elena improvised, praying Alexander wouldn't contradict her. "Spring. How lovely. And the venue? Please tell me you're considering the plaza." "We haven't decided yet. Everything's been so fast." "Well, you simply must let me help with the planning. I've organized half the society weddings in New York." Patricia leaned closer, conspiratorial. "Between you and me, dear, I'm so glad Alexander chose you instead of going through with that dreadful arranged marriage to the Beaumont girl. Can you imagine marrying someone you've never met?" Elena's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Alexander's hand found her knee under the table, squeezing, warning or comfort. She couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," Elena managed. "What arranged marriage?" Patricia's eyes widened. "Oh, dear, I thought you knew. It was all over society pages months ago. The Thorntons and Beaumonts were negotiating a marriage alliance. Alexander was supposed to marry some Beaumont heiress. But then you came along, and... well, I assumed that arrangement fell through." Every eye at the table turned to Alexander. Elena felt her heart hammering, felt the weight of the lie pressing down on her chest like a physical thing. "That arrangement," Alexander said smoothly, his hand still on Elena's knee, "was preliminary. When I met Genevieve in Paris, everything changed. My family and hers agreed that an actual connection was worth more than a business arrangement." "How romantic," Diane sighed. "Though I imagine the Beaumonts were disappointed. Their daughter must have been expecting." The Beaumonts understood. Alexander cut in. These things happen. But Elena saw the looks being exchanged around the table, saw the wheels turning behind polite smiles. They were wondering why Genevieve Beaumont would agree to be passed over for herself. The logic was starting to crack, and Elena could feel the whole structure swaying. They left as soon as politely possible, Alexander making excuses about business calls and prior commitments. In the limousine, Elena finally let out the breath she'd been holding. That was a disaster, she said. It was manageable. They're suspicious, Alexander. Patricia basically laid out the entire situation. When the real Genevieve arrives tomorrow, we'll handle it. But Alexander's voice lacked conviction. He poured them both whiskey from the limo bar, despite it being barely 2 in the afternoon. Here, you need this. Elena drank, the liquor burning away some of her panic. Your grandmother knows. Patricia's suspects. How many others have figured it out? Evelyn won't say anything. She's loyal to family above all else. And Patricia is a gossip, but she has no proof. Just speculation. For now, Elena set down her glass. But tomorrow when Genevieve walks in, tomorrow is tomorrow. We still have tonight. Alexander's eyes met hers, and there was something raw in them, something desperate. One more night of this arrangement, of playing house in my penthouse, of pretending we're engaged. And then what? We just go back to our separate lives? You think we can flip a switch and forget the past 2 days? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him, but I know I'm not ready for this to end yet. The confession hung between them, honest and terrifying. Elena wanted to respond, to say that she wasn't ready either, that somewhere between the office and the gala, in this moment, the pretending had started to feel real. But before she could, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at it, and his expression shuddered. It's my head of security. I need to take this. He answered, his voice clipped and professional. Yes? What do you mean she's early? That's impossible. No, don't let her up. Stall her. I'm 10 minutes away. He ended the call, and Elena saw actual fear in his eyes. What is it? Genevieve Beaumont. She's at the tower. She arrived a day early. The words hit Elena like ice water. But you said... I know what I said. She must have caught an earlier flight. Alexander leaned forward, speaking rapidly to the driver. Thornton Tower, back entrance. Now. The limousine accelerated, and Elena's mind spun. This was it. The end of the charade. In minutes, she'd come face to face with a woman she'd been impersonating, and everything would collapse. What do we do? Elena's voice shook. We think. Fast. Alexander's hand found hers, gripping tight. Security will keep her in the lobby. We have maybe 5 minutes before she demands to be let up. We go into the service entrance, get you to the penthouse, and I'll meet her in my office. And then I tell her the truth, that the arrangement isn't going to work, that I've chosen someone else. Elena stared at him. You're going to break off an engagement that was never real to begin with. What choice do I have? His eyes burned into hers. I can't let her meet you. If the Beaumonts discover I've been parading an imposter around New York society, they could sue for breach of contract defamation. They could destroy me and the company. The limousine screeched to a halt at the tower's service entrance. Alexander pulled Elena out, keeping her hand locked in his as they navigated through corridors she'd never seen. Employee passages, service elevators, the hidden infrastructure that kept buildings like this running. They burst into the penthouse, and Alexander immediately went to the security panel, pulling up camera feeds. Elena watched over his shoulder as he found the lobby cameras. There she was, Genevieve Beaumont. Elena's breath caught. The woman was stunning, tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from a lifetime of privilege. She wore a designer travel outfit that probably cost what Elena used to make it a month, and she was speaking animatedly to a security guard, her expression growing more irritated by the second. She doesn't look happy, Elena observed. She's about to be even less happy. Alexander pulled out his phone, then stopped, his thumb hovering over the screen. Elena, listen to me. When this is over, when you leave here, I need you to know that these past 2 days... Don't. Elena placed her hand over his, stopping him. Don't make it harder than it already is. Alexander, if you say it, if we acknowledge what happened between us, it'll only make it worse. I'm not Genevieve Beaumont. I'm not part of your world. I'm just a girl who walked into the wrong office at the wrong time. You're more than that. His voice was rough, raw with emotion she'd never heard before. His phone buzzed. A text from security. Miss Beaumont is demanding to see you immediately. Says she'll call her father if we don't let her up in the next 60 seconds. Alexander's jaw tightened. I have to go. Stay here. Don't answer the door for anyone. Alexander. He kissed her. It was sudden and desperate and completely unexpected. His hands cupped her face as his mouth moved over hers with an urgency that stole her breath. Elena's fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with equal desperation, because this was goodbye. This was the end, and they both knew it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. One more thing I need to say, he whispered. Whatever happens next, thank you for walking into the wrong office, for agreeing to this insanity, for being exactly who you are. Then he was gone, leaving Elena standing alone in the penthouse with her heart hammering and her lips still tingling from their first and last kiss. Elena watched the security feed on Alexander's tablet, her heart in her throat. She could see him emerge into the lobby, see Genevieve's face light up, and then immediately darken when she registered his expression. The feed didn't have audio, but Elena could read the body language. Genevieve was confused, then angry, gesturing sharply as Alexander spoke. He was calm, controlled, his hands in his pockets, a casual stance that was completely at odds with the tension Elena knew he was feeling. Genevieve pulled out her phone. Alexander said something that made her pause. They spoke for another minute, then 2, then 5. Elena watched Genevieve's expression cycle through disbelief, fury, and finally something that looked almost like relief. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. Penthouse. Both of us. Now. Her stomach dropped. Both of us meant Genevieve was coming up. The real Genevieve was about to meet the fake one. And Elena had no idea what Alexander was thinking. She barely had time to panic before the elevator doors opened. Alexander entered first, followed by Genevieve Beaumont, who swept into the penthouse with the confidence of someone who'd always belonged in spaces like this. Up close, she was even more striking. Ice blue eyes that were currently fixed on Elena with laser focus. So, Genevieve said, her accent a blend of French and American private school. You're the woman my father has been negotiating my life away for. She turned to Alexander. Except you're not Genevieve Beaumont, are you? Elena's mouth went dry. I can explain. Please do. Genevieve moved the bar cart, pouring herself a generous scotch. Because I just flew 7 hours expecting to meet my arranged husband, only to find out he's been parading someone else around New York claiming to be me. It's not like that, Alexander started. Then what is it like? Genevieve's eyes were sharp. The truth. Now. Because right now, I'm deciding whether to call my lawyers or just my father. And trust me, you don't want to choose my father. Elena and Alexander exchanged glances. Then, simultaneously, they both started talking, words tumbling over each other in their rush to explain. Elena told her version. The wrong office, the desperate need for money, the arrangement that had spiraled out of control. Alexander told his. The desire to escape the arranged marriage, the opportunity that had presented itself, the plan that had gone sideways when Genevieve arrived early. When they finished, Genevieve was silent. She sipped her scotch, looking between them with an expression Elena couldn't read. Let me see if I understand, Genevieve finally said. You, Elena Chun, pretended to be me for money. And you, Alexander, were trying to find a way out of our arrangement by using her as a stand-in. She paused. That's either the most idiotic plan I've ever heard, or actually, no. It's just idiotic. What were you thinking? I was thinking, Alexander said tightly, that I didn't want to spend my life married to a stranger for the sake of corporate strategy. And I was thinking, Elena added quietly, that I needed money to survive. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate. Genevieve studied Elena for a long moment. You're not what I expected. When I saw the photograph from the gala, I thought my father had somehow got me confused with someone else. Because that woman looked nothing like me. I know. I'm sorry. I never meant. Stop apologizing. Genevieve set down her glass. I'm not angry. I'm relieved. Relieved? Alexander and Elena said in unison. Do you want to know why I was arriving early? Genevieve moved to the windows, looking out over the city. Because I was coming to break off the engagement myself. I have a boyfriend in Paris. Pierre. We've been together for 3 years, but my father refuses to accept him because he's an artist, not a CEO. When father arranged this marriage, I was going to go through with it to please him. But then I realized I don't want this life. I don't want arranged marriages and corporate mergers and pretending to be something I'm not. She turned back to face them, and Elena saw tears in her eyes. So when I saw those photos of you two at the gala, looking at each other like that, I was jealous. Not because Alexander was with someone else, but because you looked like you actually cared about each other, like you were fighting for something real. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elena felt Alexander's eyes on her, but couldn't bring herself to look at him. So here's what's going to happen. Genevieve continued, suddenly all business. I'm going to call my father and tell him I've met Alexander, and we've mutually agreed we're not compatible. I'll take full responsibility. Say it was my decision, and that I'm choosing Pierre instead. Our families won't like it, but they'll accept it eventually. Hotels and real estate can merge without a marriage. And Elena? Alexander asked. Genevieve looked at Elena, and something like understanding passed between them. Elena keeps the money. She earned it, honestly. Playing me for 2 days in this world? That deserves combat pay. Despite everything, Elena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Thank you, I think. But there's one condition, Genevieve said, her eyes moving between them. You two need to figure out what's actually happening here. Because I've been watching you for the past 10 minutes. And the way you keep looking at each other? That's not fake. That's not arrangement. That's real. We barely know each other, Elena protested weakly. So? I knew Pierre for 3 days before I knew I loved him. Time doesn't dictate feelings. Genevieve collected her purse. Suddenly, all efficiency. I'm going to get a hotel room and make some calls. I'll handle the families, the press, all of it. You too. She moved toward the elevator. Stop lying to yourselves. It's exhausting to watch. The elevator doors closed behind her, and Elena and Alexander were alone again. The silence stretched between them, waited with everything unsaid. So, Elena finally managed. That went better than expected? Better than expected, Alexander agreed, but he didn't move, didn't close the distance between them. Elena, what she said, don't. Elena held up her hand. Please, I can't. This isn't my world, Alexander. These past 2 days have been incredible and terrifying, completely surreal, but they're not real. I'm going to take my check, pay my bills, and go back to my life. You're going to stay here and run your empire. That's how this ends. Why? Alexander's voice was rough. Why does it have to end? Because look at this place. Elena gestured around the penthouse. Look at your life, your world. I don't belong here. I'm a secretary, or I was supposed to be, before I stumbled into your office. I live in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates. I eat ramen most nights because it's all I can afford. You probably spend more on a single dinner than I make in a month. Money doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Money is the only reason I'm here. I agreed to this because I was desperate, because I needed to survive. And now you're looking at me like I'm someone worth keeping, but you don't even know me. You know the version of me who wore expensive dresses and went to galas. You don't know the real me. Then let me... Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides, standing close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Let me know the real you. Let me take you to dinner. A real dinner, not some charity gala. Let me learn what you like, what you hate, what makes you laugh. Give me a chance to be more than just the cold CO you walked in on 2 days ago. Elena's eyes stung with tears. And if it doesn't work? If we try and it falls apart? Then at least we tried. At least we gave ourselves a chance to be something real instead of just walking away and spending the rest of our lives wondering what if. This is crazy, Elena whispered. Crazy as agreeing to pretend to be someone else for money. Crazy as falling for that person in less than 48 hours. Alexander's hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. But here we are, and I'm asking, begging if I have to, for you to give us a chance. A real one. No arrangements, no pretending. Just you and me, figuring this out together. Elena knew she should say no. Knew that this was a terrible idea that would probably end in heartbreak. Knew that people from different worlds didn't just bridge those gaps because they wanted to. But she looked into Alexander's eyes and saw the same fear, the same hope, the same desperate longing that she felt. And she thought about Genevieve's words, "Time doesn't dictate feelings." One date, Elena heard herself say, "A real one, where you pick me up at my actual apartment and take me somewhere that's not a 5-star restaurant, where we're just Elena and Alexander, not Beaumont and Thornton, and we see if this thing between us is real or just adrenaline and proximity." One date, Alexander agreed, and the smile that broke across his face was genuine and unguarded and absolutely breathtaking. "Though I should warn you, I'm not good at regular dates. I'll probably mess it up." "Good. I'm terrible at them too. We can mess it up together." Alexander laughed. Actually laughed, a sound Elena had never heard before. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger, happier, more human. "Elena Chun," he said, pulling her close, "you walked into the wrong office and completely upended my life." "Sorry about that," Elena murmured against his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. "Don't be. It's the best mistake that's ever happened to me." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, both knowing that the hard part was just beginning. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. 3 days later, Elena stood in her actual apartment, all 400 square feet of it, trying to decide what to wear for a date with a billionaire who'd promised to keep things normal. "You're insane," her roommate Jen said from the doorway. "Eating cereal straight from the box. Completely, certifiably insane. You're going out with Alexander Thornton. The Alexander Thornton. And you're wearing that?" Elena looked down at her jeans and simple sweater. He said, "Casual." "Yeah, but his version of casual probably means designer labels we can't pronounce. You should at least wear that emerald dress from the gala, which I had to return, along with all the jewelry." Elena had insisted on giving everything back except the check, which she'd already deposited and used to pay off her most pressing debts. The relief of seeing those balances zero out had been almost overwhelming. "This is the point, Jen. If Alexander wants to date me, he gets the real me, thrift store clothes and all." A knock at the door made her jump. Jen grinned. "Showtime. Try not to fall in love with him before dessert, okay?" "Too late for that," Elena muttered, but Jen had already disappeared into her room. Elena opened the door, and her breath caught. Alexander stood in the narrow hallway looking completely out of place and somehow perfect. Jeans that probably cost more than her rent, a casual button-down, and leather jacket that made him look dangerous and approachable all at once. His hair was slightly mussed, and he wasn't wearing a tie for the first time since she'd met him. "Hi," he said, and Elena saw nervousness in his eyes. Actual nervousness. "You look beautiful. You look..." She gestured at him, at the casual outfit that somehow made him even more attractive than the suits. "Different. Good different. I've been informed by Margaret that suits on a first date are intimidating and counterproductive to genuine connection." His lips quirked. She had a whole PowerPoint. Elena laughed. "Your assistant made you a dating PowerPoint. She's very thorough. There were charts." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" They took the subway. Alexander's idea, despite Elena's protest that he probably hadn't been on public transportation in years. He was right. He looked completely lost swiping his first ever Metro card, and Elena couldn't help laughing as she guided him through the turnstile. "I feel like a tourist in my own city," he admitted as they boarded a crowded train. "This is humbling." "This is normal," Elena corrected, holding onto a pole as the train lurched forward. For most people, anyway. They ended up in a small Italian place in the West Village, the kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, where the owner knew everyone's names and the smell of garlic and oregano made your mouth water. Nothing like the five-star establishments Alexander usually frequented. "This okay?" Elena asked, suddenly nervous that she'd chosen wrong. "It's perfect," Alexander said, and meant it. They squeezed into a corner booth, their knees touching under the small table. Over plates of carbonara and cheap red wine, they talked. Really talked. Elena told him about her mother's illness, about the overwhelming debt that had accumulated, about her dreams of maybe someday having enough stability to go back to school. Alexander talked about the pressure of inheriting his father's company at 28, about the expectations that had defined his entire life, about how he sometimes felt like he was playing a role in his own existence. "Is that why you went along with the arranged marriage?" Elena asked. "Because it was expected?" "Partly. Also because I thought if I was going to marry someone I didn't love anyway, it might as well serve a business purpose." He swirled his wine. "Cynical, I know. Practical," Elena countered. "You were raised in a different world. Different rules." "Maybe. But these past few days with you, it made me realize how much I've been missing. Real connection. Genuine feeling. Someone who challenges me instead of just agreeing with everything I say. I do challenge you, don't I?" Elena smiled. "Is that annoying?" "It's refreshing." His hand found hers across the table. "You have no idea how rare that is in my world. Everyone wants something from me. Business deals, social access, money. You're the first person in years who just sees me, Alexander, not Thornton Industries or my bank account." "Well, technically I did agree to your arrangement for money," Elena pointed out. "True, but you earned every penny. And now you're here, on a date that comes with no payment, no contract, no benefit to you except my sparkling personality." Elena laughed. "Sparkling might be overselling it. Interesting, definitely. Complicated, absolutely. Falling for you? Undoubtedly." The words hummed between them, honest and terrifying. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. "Alexander. Too soon." He grimaced. Margaret's PowerPoint specifically said not to confess feelings on a first date. "I'm terrible at this." "No, you're not. You're just honest," which is terrifying and kind of wonderful. Elena squeezed his hand. "And for the record, I'm falling too. Have been since you kissed me in the penthouse." "That was a good kiss," Alexander said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "It was a great kiss. Want to repeat it?" His eyes were dark with promise. "Definitely. But maybe after dessert? I've heard they make their tiramisu in-house, and I have priorities." Alexander threw back his head and laughed, drawing curious looks from other diners. Elena realized she was seeing yet another version of him. Relaxed, happy, young in a way he probably rarely allowed himself to be. They ordered tiramisu and cannoli, sharing both straight from the plates with their forks like teenagers. Alexander got mascarpone on his nose, and Elena reached over to wipe it off. The gesture intimate and easy. "Thank you," Alexander said softly. "For what?" "Saving you from dessert disaster. For giving me this. A normal date. A normal evening. A chance to be someone other than who I'm expected to be. You're welcome. Though I should warn you, if we do this, if we actually try to make this work, it's going to be complicated. Your family, your business associates, the media, let them talk. I've spent my entire life managing other people's opinions. Maybe it's time I stopped caring what they think and started caring about what I want." "And what do you want?" Alexander leaned across the table, close enough that Elena could feel his breath. "You, this, us, figuring out if what started as pretend can become something real. That's a lot of pressure for a second date," Elena whispered. "Then let's not think that far ahead. Let's just think about tonight, about this moment, about the fact that I really, really want to kiss you right now." "Then what are you waiting for?" He kissed her across the checkered tablecloth, tasting of coffee and cream and promise. It was different from their desperate kiss in the penthouse. Softer, sweeter, full of potential instead of goodbye. When they broke apart, the restaurant owner was grinning at them, and an elderly couple at the next table was applauding. You're very popular here, Alexander observed, slightly dazed. It's the romance. People love seeing it. Elena grabbed her coat. Come on, let's walk before we give them more of a show. They wandered through the village hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Alexander told her about his childhood, about the pressure of being groomed to take over the company from age 5. Elena talked about her childhood dreams, simple things like traveling, writing, having a garden. A garden? Alexander looked genuinely curious. That's your dream. Part of it. I know it sounds silly to someone who owns penthouses and probably has an estate somewhere with actual grounds. I do, actually, in Westchester. 15 acres, most of it overgrown because I'm never there. He stopped walking, turning to face her. You should see it. Tomorrow, if you're free, we could spend the day there. Plan something, if you want. Make it less of a mausoleum and more of a home. Elena's breath caught. You're inviting me to your estate? I'm inviting you to potentially our estate. If this works, if we work. He looked almost shy, this powerful man who commanded boardrooms. Too fast. Terrifyingly fast. Elena agreed. But also, yes, I'd love to see it. They walked back to Elena's apartment building, neither wanting the evening to end. At her door, Alexander pulled her close. Thank you for tonight, he said. For showing me what normal feels like. For being you. Thank you for taking a chance on me. On us. Elena, I need you to know, this isn't about the arrangement anymore. This isn't about what started in my office 3 days ago. This is about you and me, here and now. And I'm all in, whatever comes next. Even if it's messy, even if your family disapproves, or the media has a field day, or especially then, because you're worth fighting for. Elena kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. The hope and fear and desperate longing. His arms came around her, holding her like she was precious, like she mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow, Elena confirmed. Though I should warn you, I know nothing about gardens. I'll probably kill whatever we plant. Then we'll kill it together. And try again. He kissed her one more time, soft and sweet, before reluctantly letting her go. Elena watched him disappear down the stairs, her lips tingling and her heart racing. Inside her apartment, Jen was waiting with knowing eyes. So, I think I might actually be dating Alexander Thornton. How do you feel about that? Elena thought about the evening, about the laughter and the kissing and the way Alexander looked at her like she hung the moon, about tomorrow and the possibility of future tomorrows. Terrified, she admitted, and happier than I've been in years. Good, Jen said. You deserve happy. That night, Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Thank you for tonight. Dreaming of gardens and second chances. Sleep well. She smiled, typing back. Thank you for being brave enough to try. See you tomorrow. Sweet dreams. E. As she drifted off to sleep, Elena couldn't help but marvel at how drastically her life had changed. 3 days ago, she walked into the wrong office looking for a job. Now she was falling in love with a man she'd initially pretended to be engaged to, and somehow, impossibly, he was falling back. It was messy and complicated and completely illogical. It was also, Elena thought as sleep finally claimed her, absolutely perfect. The Westchester estate was everything Elena hadn't let herself imagine. Rolling hills, mature trees, a stone manor house that looked like it belonged in an English countryside rather than an hour outside New York City. Alexander picked her up in a different car this time, something lower and sportier that he drove himself, and they spent the drive talking about everything and nothing. This is where you grew up? Elena asked as they pulled up the winding drive. Partially. We also had the penthouse in the city. I spent weekdays there for school, weekends here. He parked in front of the house, his expression complicated. I haven't been back in months. After my father died, it felt too empty. Elena took his hand. We don't have to stay. We could just drive around, find somewhere else. No. He squeezed her hand. I want to share this with you. Want to see if it can feel like home again with you here. The house was beautiful but cold, filled with expensive furniture covered in dust sheets and family portraits that watched them with stern eyes. Alexander led her through room after room. Formal dining room, library, parlor, each one pristine and unlived in. Your family liked things proper, Elena observed, studying a portrait of a severe-looking man who could only be Alexander's father. My family liked appearances. Everything had to look perfect, even if it wasn't. He turned away from the portrait. Come on, the gardens are this way. That's the only part one actually liked. They stepped through French doors onto a terrace that overlooked what had once been elaborate gardens, now overgrown and wild but still beautiful in their abandonment. Rose bushes had taken over pathways, and ivy climbed the stone walls like nature reclaiming territory. It's wild, Elena breathed, but in a good way, like it's been freed from having to be perfect. Alexander looked at her, something softening in his expression. That's exactly what it feels like. They spent the afternoon working the garden. Elena with no idea what she was doing, Alexander equally clueless, both of them laughing as they tried to figure out which plants were weeds and which were flowers. They found a garden shed with old tools and gloves, and Alexander looked ridiculously handsome with dirt on his face and his sleeves rolled up. We're terrible at this, Elena said, surveying their work. They'd managed to clear maybe 10 square feet of pathway, and she was pretty sure they'd accidentally pulled up at least 3 things that weren't weeds. We are, Alexander agreed, but I don't care. This is the most relaxed I've been in. I can't remember. They sat on the terrace steps, shoulders touching, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Elena felt something settle in her chest, a rightness, a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. Elena, Alexander said quietly, I need to tell you something. Her stomach dropped at his tone. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. He turned to face her. Tomorrow, the board has called an emergency meeting. My Uncle Richard has been pushing for a vote of no confidence in my leadership. He's using the Beaumont situation, or what he thinks is the Beaumont situation, as ammunition. Says I'm too unstable to run the company. But Genevieve handled all that. She talked to her family. She did. But Richard is arguing that my impulsive engagement and quick breakup show poor judgment. He's been working the board members, telling them I'm not ready, that I need adult supervision. Elena felt anger flare hot in her chest. That's ridiculous. You've grown the company 20% in 2 years. You've been researching me? Alexander's lips quirked. I Googled you. Sue me. The point is, your uncle is wrong. Maybe not. The board will decide. He took both her hands. But I need you to know, whatever happens, this doesn't change what's between us. If I lose the company, I lose it. But I'm not losing you. You're not going to lose the company. We won't let that happen. You think I'm going to let some power-hungry uncle steal what's rightfully yours? After everything you've told me about how hard you've worked. Elena stood, pulling Alexander up with her. What time is the meeting? 2 o'clock. Why? Because we're going to be there. Both of us. And we're going to remind that board exactly who Alexander Thornton is. Not some impulsive child, but a man who's willing to fight for what matters. Even when what matters is complicated and messy and goes against everyone's expectations. Alexander stared at her. You want to come to a board meeting? I want to support you. Unless... She faltered slightly. Unless you don't want me there. I know I'm not part of your business world, and maybe that would make things worse. He kissed her, cutting off her words. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. I would love for you to be there. But Elena, these people, they'll eat you alive. They'll ask invasive questions, make assumptions, judge everything about you. Let them. I survived a gala full of socialites while pretending to be someone I wasn't. I think I can handle a board meeting while being exactly who I am. You're extraordinary, Alexander said, wonder in his voice. You know that. I'm stubborn. There's a difference. No, you're both. And I'm the luckiest man alive. They stayed at the estate until dark, making dinner in the massive kitchen from whatever they could find in the ancient pantry. Pasta and Jared sauce. Not exactly gourmet, but perfect for their purposes. They ate at the formal dining table, which had probably never seen such casual fare, and talked about the next day's strategy. "I'll need to brief you on the board members," Alexander said. "Who's likely to support me? Who's in Richard's pocket? Who might be swayed? Then brief me. I'm a quick study." They moved to the library, where Alexander pulled out files and photographs, walking Elena through the politics of Thornton Industries. By midnight, she could name every board member, knew their backgrounds, understood the power dynamics at play. "You really are a quick study," Alexander said, impressed. "I told you, when I commit to something, I'm all in." She covered a yawn. "Though I should probably get home. I need to figure out what one wears to a corporate coup attempt." "Stay," Alexander said suddenly. "Stay here tonight. There are dozens of bedrooms, and it's late," and he stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not asking for anything except your company. I don't want to be alone in this house tonight." Elena saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear he was trying to hide. This man who seemed invincible was terrified of losing everything his family had built. Terrified of facing that alone. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll stay." They said goodnight in a hallway outside the guest rooms, a lingering kiss that promised more, but respected boundaries. Elena changed into a borrowed t-shirt, Alexander's, soft from years of washing and smelling like his cologne, and climbed into a bed that was probably worth more than her entire apartment. She was almost asleep when she heard her door open. Alexander stood in the doorway, silhouetted by hallway light. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see tomorrow going wrong. I see Richard winning. See myself losing everything my father built." Elena pulled back the covers in invitation. "Then don't sleep alone." He crossed the room and climbed in beside her, fully clothed, just needing the comfort of another person. Elena curled into his side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We'll figure it out," she murmured. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." "Together," Alexander echoed, his arms tightening around her. "I like the sound of that." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, finding comfort in proximity. And when Elena woke near dawn to find Alexander watching her with soft eyes, she knew, whatever happened today, whatever challenges they faced, they were in this together, for better or worse. She'd fallen completely in love with Alexander Thornton, and she was going to fight like hell to protect what they were building. Elena stood in front of Alexander's penthouse mirror, adjusting her outfit for the third time. She'd asked Genevieve for help, a text sent in desperation, and the other woman had responded with an entire styling consultation via video chat. "Power is in the details," Genevieve had said, her French accent making everything sound more authoritative. "You're not trying to be me anymore. You're being you, but the you who belongs beside Alexander Thornton." The result was a navy suit that Elena had bought that morning with part of her payment, paired with a cream silk blouse and heels that were professional but comfortable. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and her makeup was minimal. She looked professional, capable, and most importantly, like herself. "You look perfect," Alexander said from the doorway. He was in full CEO mode, charcoal suit, steel gray tie, every inch the powerful businessman. But when he looked at Elena, she saw the man underneath, the one who'd held her last night and admitted his fears. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "With you beside me, I think I can face anything." The board meeting was held in a conference room on the executive floor, a space designed to intimidate with its massive table, leather chairs, and walls of windows overlooking the city. Elena felt eyes turn to her the moment she entered with Alexander, felt the curiosity and speculation ripple through the room. Catherine Thornton was already seated, her expression unreadable. Richard Thornton sat at the opposite end of the table, looking smug and confident. The other board members, 12 in total, watched with varying degrees of interest. "Alexander," Richard said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I didn't realize you'd be bringing guests to a board meeting. Miss Chun is here at my invitation. Alexander said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Elena. As this meeting concerns my personal life as well as my professional decisions, I thought it appropriate. Miss Chun, Catherine repeated, her eyes sharp on Elena, not Miss Beaumont. Elena Chun is the woman I'm actually seeing, Alexander said, standing at the head of the table, not Genevieve Beaumont. That arrangement was dissolved by mutual agreement. Miss Beaumont is happily engaged to someone else, and her family has no quarrel with Thornton Industries. A murmur ran through the room. Richard leaned forward, scenting blood. So you're confirming that you broke off a carefully negotiated business arrangement for? What? A woman you barely know? This is exactly the kind of impulsive, emotional decision-making that concerns this board. What concerns this board, Alexander countered, his voice hard, should be the company's performance, which has been exceptional under my leadership. Revenue is up 22% year over year. We've acquired 3 key competitors, expanded into 2 new markets, and increased shareholder value by 35%. My personal life is irrelevant. Your personal life becomes relevant when it affects your judgment, Richard shot back. When it causes you to break contracts, damage relationships with other powerful families, and make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. The Beaumont relationship was never damaged. Elena spoke up, surprising herself. Every head turned to her. Miss Beaumont and I have spoken directly. She supports Alexander's decision and has no interest in pursuing any action against him or the company. In fact, she was relieved to be released from an arrangement she never wanted. And you are... Richard's eyes were cold. Forgive me, Miss Chun, but I don't recall you being on the board or having any authority to speak here. I'm not on the board. Elena agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm someone who cares about Alexander and about this company. And I think you're all missing the point. Elena, Alexander started, but she pressed on. You're so focused on whether Alexander's personal life fits your expectations that you're ignoring what actually matters. He's grown this company exponentially. He works 18-hour days. He makes hard decisions that benefit shareholders, even when those decisions cost him personally. And yes, he also happens to have fallen for someone unexpected. Someone who doesn't fit the mold you created for him. But that doesn't make him a bad CEO. It makes him human. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Catherine Thornton did something unexpected. She smiled. A small, genuine smile. Well, she said, at least this one is fine. Mother, Alexander began. Let me finish, Alexander. Catherine stood, commanding the room's attention. Richard has been pushing for this vote of no confidence based on the argument that my son is too young, too impulsive, too emotional to lead this company. And for a moment, I was inclined to agree. The sudden engagement announcement, the equally sudden dissolution, it looked chaotic from the outside. Elena's heart sank. If Catherine was against Alexander, they'd lost before they'd even begun. But then I watched my son at that gala, Catherine continued. I watched him work the room with skill and grace. I watched him handle pressure with aplomb. And yes, I watched him look at this young woman like she hung the moon. And you know what I realized? She turned to Richard. My son is doing exactly what his father did when he took over this company. He's making it his own. He's not following someone else's playbook. He's writing his own. Catherine, this is... Richard started. My company. Catherine cut him off. Or did you forget that I own 30% of Thornton Industries through my late husband's estate? I've been silent because I wanted Alexander to prove himself without my interference. Well, he has, and I'm not going to let you steal what's rightfully his because you're jealous that you weren't the chosen heir. Richard's face went purple. This is outrageous. What's outrageous is attempting a coup based on personal vendetta rather than actual performance. Catherine looked around the table. I'm calling for a vote right now. All in favor of Alexander Thornton remaining SEO, raise your hands. Catherine's hand went up immediately. Then another board member, then another. Elena watched as hands rose around the table. 7 in total, including Catherine's. All opposed. Catherine asked. Richard's hand went up, along with 4 others. 5 against, 7 for. The motion fails. Catherine declared. Alexander remained CO. And Richard, I think it's time we discuss your role in the European division. Perhaps a less ambitious position would suit you better. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. Yes, Catherine said coldly. It is. Security will escort you out. As if summoned, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Richard looked around the table for support, found none, and stormed out with what dignity he could muster. The remaining board members began filing out, several stopping to shake Alexander's hand or murmur congratulations. When they were finally alone except for Catherine, Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you, Mother. Don't thank me. Thank Miss Chun. Her little speech reminded me why I fell in love with your father. Because he saw me, really saw me, instead of just seeing what I could do for his company. Catherine turned to Elena. You're good for him. You make him human again. Don't let him forget that. Then she too left, leaving Elena and Alexander alone in the vast conference room. We did it. Elena breathed. You kept your company. We did it, Alexander corrected, pulling her into his arms. I couldn't have done it without you. The way you stood up to Richard, the way you spoke about me. Elena, you were incredible. I just told the truth. You fought for me, for us. He cupped her face in his hands. No one's ever done that before. No one's ever seen me as anything other than the Thornton heir, or the CEO, or the bank account. But you see me. I love you, Elena said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know it's too soon and probably crazy, but I love you, Alexander Thornton. Not your money or your company or your penthouse. Just you. Alexander's eyes went bright with something that looked like tears. I love you too. I've been trying not to say it, trying to be rational about this. But God, Elena, I love you so much it terrifies me. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he felt into it. Elena kissed him back, not caring that they were in a conference room, not caring about anything except this man and this moment and the future they were building together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, he said. Elena pulled back. What? Move in with me. To the penthouse. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build a life with you. Elena, a real life, not an arrangement or performance. The real thing. Alexander, that's... We've been together less than a week. I don't care. I've spent my entire life being careful, being strategic, making the sensible choice. You walked into the wrong office and turned my world upside down. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just existing. So yes, it's fast. Yes, it's crazy. But when you know, you know. And I know you're it for me. Elena's mind spun. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too much too soon, that people didn't fall in love in a week, that moving in together after knowing each other for days was insane. But her heart knew differently. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll move in with you. Alexander's face split into a grin so wide and genuine, it made him look like a different person. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a child, and Elena couldn't help but laugh too. You're sure? He asked when he set her down. Because I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure. Terrified, but sure. She cupped his face. Though I have conditions, anything. I pay rent. I don't care if it's $1 a month, but I'm not a kept woman. I'm your partner. Deal. What else? I get to decorate. Your penthouse is beautiful, but it's so sterile. It needs color. Life. Maybe some plants. Plants, yes. Absolutely. I love plants now. We're plant people. His eyes were dancing with happiness. Any other demands? Just one more. Elena's voice softened. Don't lose yourself in this. In us. You're still Alexander Thornton, CEO of Thornton Industries. I fell in love with all of you, including the ruthless businessman side. So don't give that up thinking you need to be someone different from me. Alexander's expression turned serious. And you don't lose yourself either. You're still Elena Chen, strong, independent, capable of calling me on my bullshit. Promise me you won't become some trophy girlfriend who just agrees with everything I say. I promise. Someone needs to keep your ego in check. Agreed. So we're doing this? Really doing this. We're really doing this. They kissed again, sealing the promise. When they finally left the conference room hand in hand, the office beyond was buzzing with the news of Richard's departure and Alexander's victory. Margaret was waiting by Alexander's office, a knowing smile on her face. Congratulations, Mr. Thornton. The board vote went in your favor. It did, thanks to Miss Chun here. Alexander's hand tightened on Elena's. Margaret, I need you to arrange for movers to Elena's apartment. She's moving into the penthouse. Margaret's eyes widened fractionally. The most surprised Elena had ever seen her show. Of course. When should I schedule them? As soon as possible, Elena said, making the decision feel real. This weekend. Consider it done. Margaret made a note. And shall I update your emergency contacts to include Miss Chen? Yes. And give her access to all my properties, vehicles, accounts, everything. Alexander, that's not necessary. Elena protested. It is to me. If we're doing this, we're doing it all the way. No half measures. After Margaret left, Elena pulled Alexander into his office, closing the door behind him. You're moving really fast. I know, too fast. Elena thought about it. About how in 1 week, she'd gone from drowning in debt and desperate for a job to being in love with a billionaire and moving into his penthouse. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt rushed and reckless and absolutely insane. Instead, it felt like coming home. Not too fast, she said. Just fast enough. Epilogue. 6 months later. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows and Alexander's arm draped over her waist. 6 months. And she still sometimes couldn't believe this was her life. They'd made the penthouse theirs, adding color and warmth, filling it with books and plants and photographs from their weekend trips to the Westchester estate. The garden there was slowly coming back to life under their questionable care, and last week they'd found what looked like it might be roses under all the overgrowth. Morning, Alexander murmured against her neck, pulling her closer. Morning, don't you have a board meeting? Canceled it. Told them I had more important things to do. He rolled her onto her back, hovering over her with that smile that still made her heart race. Like convincing my girlfriend to marry me. Elena's breath caught. What? Alexander reached for the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. I know we said we'd take things slow. I know 6 months is soon. But Elena Chun, I can't imagine my life without you in it. You challenged me, changed me, made me believe in something more than just business and obligation. So I'm asking, will you marry me? For real this time, not as an arrangement or performance. Just you and me, choosing each other every single day for the rest of our lives. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not his grandmother's engagement ring this time, but something new. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, deep blue like the ocean, nothing like what anyone would expect. It's perfect, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. You're perfect. And yes, of course yes. I'll marry you. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger. A perfect fit. Because of course it was. And kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. I love you, he said against her lips. My Elena. Not Beaumont. Not anyone else. Just you. I love you too. My Alexander. Cold CEO and plant murderer. And the best thing that's ever happened to me. He laughed. That genuine sound she'd worked so hard to coax out of him. Plant murderer? We've killed 3 succulents and a cactus. We're terrible at this. Then we'll be terrible at it together. He pulled her close, and Elena felt the ring press against his chest, solid and real, just like everything else. Through the windows, the city stretched out before them, vast and complicated and full of possibility. Somewhere down there, Elena's old apartment building stood, with its peeling paint and broken heater. Somewhere down there, Thornton Industries hummed with activity, with Alexander's vision making it stronger every day. But up here, In this penthouse that had become their home, in this bed where they'd learned each other's rhythms and dreams, none of that mattered. All that mattered was this. Two people who'd walked into the wrong places at the right time, who pretended to be something they weren't and discovered who they actually were, who'd chosen each other against all logic and found that love doesn't follow rules or timelines or expectations. What are you thinking about? Alexander asked, tracing patterns on her back. About wrong offices and right timing. About how the best mistake of my life was hitting the wrong elevator button. The best mistake of mine was letting you stay when you tried to leave. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. No regrets. Not a single one. Even when I drag you to boring charity galas? Even then, though I'm still not convinced I'll ever fit into your world. You don't fit into my world. You expanded it. Made it bigger, better, more real. Alexander sat up, pulling her with him. Come on, get dressed. I want to take you somewhere. Where? You'll see. Trust me. Elena looked at this man who'd once been a stranger, who'd become her partner, her love, her future. Always. They took a helicopter this time, Elena's first, and landed in the Hamptons near the Ashton estate. But instead of going to a house, Alexander led her down a path to the beach, where a simple setup waited. A blanket, champagne, the ocean stretching to the horizon. I wanted to bring you back here, Alexander said as they settled on the blanket. This is where everything almost fell apart, where Richard tried to take everything, where you fought for me. We fought for each other, Elena corrected. We did, and I want to come back here, to this place where it could have ended, and start our next chapter. Together. He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. I've been thinking about what you said when we first met. About wanting stability, about maybe going back to school someday. So I did something. I hope it's okay. Elena read the email on his screen. It was from the University School of Business, offering her admission to their MBA program with full scholarship. The Alexander Thornton Foundation Scholarship, created just this year for promising professionals seeking to advance their education. You created a scholarship? Elena's voice broke. Alexander, this is too much? Overstepping? I just wanted you to have the opportunities you deserve. But if you'd rather do something else. Elena kissed him, cutting off his worried words. It's perfect. You're perfect. And yes, I want to go back to school. I want to build something of my own, maybe help run the foundation someday. Really? Really? Though I'll need to keep my current job too. Your current job? Alexander looked confused. Elena laughed, keeping you human. Making sure you don't become so focused on a company that you forget what actually matters. It's full-time work, honestly. Very demanding boss. Sounds like a terrible job, Alexander said, pulling her into his lap. I hear the boss is cold and demanding and never smiles. He smiles now. His girlfriend taught him how. Smart woman, this girlfriend. Brilliant, actually, and beautiful, and definitely out of his league. Completely out of my league, Alexander agreed, which is why I'm never letting her go. They sat on the beach as the sun climbed higher, talking about the future, the wedding they'd planned, the life they'd build, the challenges they'd face. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be scrutiny, judgment, people who didn't understand how a secretary and a CEO could possibly work. But they'd face it together, just like they'd faced everything else. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Genevieve. Saw the engagement announcement. About time. Pierre and I are getting married in Paris this summer. You're both invited. We're something fabulous. Gee. Elena showed Alexander and they both laughed. The woman she'd once impersonated had become a genuine friend. Checking in regularly, offering advice about navigating the social world Elena now inhabited. We should go, Alexander said, to Paris for her wedding. Make it a real vacation. Just us, no work, no obligations. Can the CEO of Thornton Industries really take a vacation? The CEO of Thornton Industries can do whatever he wants, especially when his brilliant, beautiful, definitely out of his league fiancée asks him to. I didn't ask. You were about to. Elena smiled. But I was also thinking, what if we made it our honeymoon? Get married before Paris. Something small and simple, just us and the people we actually care about. Alexander's eyes lit up. Yes. God. Yes. I don't want to wait months for some huge society wedding where I have to invite hundreds of people I barely know. I just want to marry you. Then let's do it. This summer. Something intimate. Maybe at the estate. In the garden we're slowly bringing back to life. Perfect. He kissed her softly. You're perfect. This is perfect. All of it. They stayed on the beach until the afternoon sun drove them back to the helicopter. On the flight back to the city, Elena looked down at the world below, the estates and highways and endless possibility, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She walked into the wrong office looking for a secretary position and found a purpose. She pretended to be someone else and discovered who she actually was. She'd fallen in love with a man who seemed impossible and found that the impossible was just another word for unexpected. What are you smiling about? Alexander asked, holding her hand as the city grew closer. Just thinking about wrong turns and right destinations, Elena said, and how sometimes the best stories start with a mistake. This story started the moment you walked through my door, Alexander corrected. Everything before that was just prelude. Then what's this part? The middle? The climax? This, Alexander said, bringing her hand to his lips, is the beginning of everything that matters. And as the helicopter descended toward the city that had become their home, Elena knew he was right. The past had led them here, and the future stretched out before them, uncertain and exciting and completely theirs. She'd come for a secretary interview and walked into the wrong office. But somehow, impossibly, wonderfully, she walked into exactly the right life.